Jake Sullivan stood at the viewing window of the transport ship, watching the massive station grow larger against the backdrop of space. Craventhar Station looked like a fortress built by giants. Metal towers stretched in every direction, and bright lights marked training grounds and landing bays. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, a young man with brown hair and nervous eyes. He was 22 years old, and he was about to become the first human ever to train at the most respected military academy in the galaxy. The ship shuddered as it began its docking sequence. Jake gripped his bag tighter. Inside were a few personal items from Earth, a photo of his family and a letter from his mentor, Ben Carter. Ben had spent months preparing Jake for this moment. The old military officer had warned him that it would not be easy. The aliens would not welcome him with open arms. They would test him, push him, and try to break him. "You ready for this, kid?" The pilot called from the cockpit. She was human too, one of the few stationed at the transport hub nearby. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jake said, though his stomach twisted with doubt. The docking clamps locked into place with a heavy thud. The airlock door hissed open and Jake stepped through into Craventhar Station. The corridor beyond was huge, built for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling stretched 15 feet above his head. The walls were made of dark metal, covered in scratches and dents from centuries of use. As Jake walked toward the main assembly hall, he began to see them. The Craventhari. They stood over 8 feet tall, with thick reptilian skin covered in scales that ranged from deep green to dark gray. Their eyes were golden and sharp, watching everything. Some bore scars across their faces and arms, marks of battles won and lost. They moved with the confidence of born warriors, each step purposeful and strong. Jake felt small walking among them. He forced himself to keep his head up and his shoulders back, just like Ben had taught him. Show no fear, give no ground. The assembly hall was enormous. Hundreds of recruits stood in organized rows, representing dozens of different species from across the galaxy. Jake saw the Chitauri, insect-like beings with forearms and natural armor plating. The Narexi were there too, aquatic creatures in special suits that kept their skin moist. The Zephrons looked like living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting the light in rainbow patterns. A Craventhari officer stood at the front of the hall on a raised platform. He was massive even by their standards, covered in more scars than Jake could count. His golden eyes swept across the assembled recruits with the gaze of someone who had seen 1,000 battles. "I am Commander Vexthor," the officer said, his voice deep and powerful. "You have come to Craventhar Station because you wish to be warriors. You wish to learn from the best fighters in the galaxy. But understand this, many of you will fail. Many of you will break. Only the strong will remain." Jake stood at attention, trying to blend in with the crowd. It didn't work. "You," Commander Vexthor said, pointing directly at him. "Step forward." Every eye in the hall turned to look at Jake. He felt his heart hammering in his chest, but he walked forward until he stood alone in front of the platform. "What is your name?" Commander Vexthor asked. "Jake Sullivan, sir." "A human." The commander's face showed no emotion. "The first of your kind to stand in this hall." Another Craventhari officer stepped forward from the side. He was younger than Vexthor, but still intimidating, with bright green scales and eyes that burned with contempt. "With respect, Commander, I must question this decision," the officer said. "The humans are newcomers to the galactic community. They are soft-skinned and weak. They have no warrior tradition that we recognize. Why should we waste our time training one of them?" "Your concerns are noted, Lieutenant Zarek," Commander Vexthor said calmly. Lieutenant Zarek turned to face Jake directly. "Tell me, human, does your species even understand the concept of honor? Or do you only know how to hide behind your technology and fight from a distance like cowards?" Laughter rippled through the assembled recruits. Jake felt his face burn with anger and shame, but he remembered Ben's words. "Don't let them bait you. Let your actions speak." "I'm here to learn, sir," Jake said quietly. "Not to argue." "Here to learn," Zarek repeated mockingly. He looked at the other recruits. "The human is here to learn. Perhaps we should teach him his first lesson right now. Perhaps we should show him what real warriors look like." More laughter. Even some of the non-Craventhari species joined in. Jake stood still, his hands clenched at his sides. Commander Vexthor raised one massive hand and the hall fell silent. "Enough. The human has been accepted into this academy by order of the Galactic Coalition. He will train alongside the rest of you. If he fails, he fails. If he succeeds, he succeeds. Now all recruits will report to their assigned quarters. Training begins at dawn. The assembly broke up, recruits moving toward different sections of the station. Jake picked up his bag and followed the directions on his datapad. As he walked, he heard the whispers and saw the looks. Some were curious. Most were hostile. A group of young Kraventhari blocked his path in the corridor. The leader, a recruit with dark gray scales and a cruel smile, looked down at Jake. "I am Scormel," he said, "and I promise you this, human. You will not last 1 week here. You are weak. You do not belong among warriors." Jake met his gaze without flinching. "Then I guess we'll find out." Scormel laughed and shoved past him, his companions following. Jake continued to his quarters, a small room with a bed designed for someone much larger than him, a storage locker, and a small desk. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the letter from Ben. The old officer's handwriting was shaky but clear. "Jake, by the time you read this, you'll be facing the hardest challenge of your life. They will mock you. They will doubt you. They will try to make you quit. Remember that you carry the hopes of all humanity with you. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the fastest or the toughest, but we're survivors. We adapt, we endure. Show them what a human can do. Make us proud." Jake folded the letter carefully and put it back in his bag. Through the small window in his room, he could see Earth in the distance, a blue and white marble hanging in the darkness of space. Millions of people down there were counting on him. Millions of people were watching to see if humanity deserved its place among the stars. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow the real test would begin. Tomorrow he would have to prove that Lieutenant Zarak was wrong. Tomorrow he would begin his journey from mockery to respect. But tonight, alone in his room on an alien station, Jake Sullivan allowed himself one moment of doubt, one moment of fear. Then he pushed it down deep inside, locked it away, and prepared himself for what was to come. The galaxy would learn what humans were made of, one way or another. The alarm woke Jake before dawn. He dressed quickly in the training uniform that had been left in his locker, plain gray pants and a shirt that hung loose on his frame. The uniform was sized for Kraventhari, and Jake had to roll up the sleeves and legs just to move properly. He looked at himself in the small mirror and almost laughed. He looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. The training grounds were already full when Jake arrived. Hundreds of recruits stood in formation, their breath forming clouds in the cold morning air. Jake found his spot in the back row, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. Commander Vexthor appeared on the elevated platform, his massive form blocking out the rising sun behind him. "Today begins your first test, the obstacle course. You will climb, run, jump, and fight your way through 10 kilometers of terrain designed to break the week. Those who finish in under 2 hours will pass. Those who do not will be removed from the program. 2 hours." Jake did some quick math in his head. That meant maintaining a fast pace while navigating obstacles built for beings twice his size and strength. His heart sank, but he kept his face neutral. The recruits lined up at the starting point. Jake found himself next to a massive Kraventhari who looked down at him with amusement. "Try not to get trampled, little human," the Kraventhari said with a grin that showed too many teeth. The starting horn blared and the mass of recruits surged forward. Jake ran as fast as he could, but within seconds he was being left behind. The Kraventhari moved with powerful strides that covered twice the ground of his own steps. The Chitauri scuttled on their forelegs with incredible speed. Even the crystal-formed Zephrons somehow glided across the terrain faster than Jake could sprint. The first obstacle was a wall 30 feet high. Jake watched as the other recruits scaled it with ease. The Kraventhari simply leaped halfway up and pulled themselves over. The Chitauri climbed it like spiders. Jake reached the wall and looked up, already breathing hard. He grabbed the first handhold and began to climb. His arms burned. His fingers ached. Halfway up, he almost lost his grip and had to hang on with shaking arms until he could find another foothold. When he finally pulled himself over the top and dropped down the other side, the last of the other recruits was already disappearing around a bend in the course. Jake ran on. The next obstacle was a mud pit 50 feet wide with ropes hanging across it. The recruits were supposed to swing from rope to cross. Jake grabbed the first rope and jumped. His hand slipped on the wet surface and he fell straight into the thick mud below. It was cold and deep, reaching up to his chest. He waded through it, the mud sucking at his legs with every step, making each movement exhausting. By the time he climbed out on the other side, covered in mud from head to toe, Jake could not see any other recruits. He was alone on the course, and he had barely completed 2 obstacles. He kept going, through a tunnel so low that he had to crawl on his belly, over a cargo net that swayed and twisted under his weight, across a beam suspended over a pit of water that was probably freezing cold, under barbed wire while automated blasters fired stun rounds over his head. Each obstacle took longer than it should. Each one pushed Jake to his limits. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. Cuts and bruises covered his arms and legs. But he did not stop. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down on Jake as he struggled through the course. He saw the finish line ahead. A simple banner stretched across the path. He stumbled toward it, his legs barely holding him up. Commander Vexthor stood at the finish line with a datapad in his hand. He looked at Jake with those unreadable golden eyes. 4 hours and 17 minutes, Vexthor said, more than double the required time. Jake bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for breath. He knew what was coming. Failure, removal from the program, a return to Earth in shame. Report to the medical bay for treatment, Commander Vexthor said. Training continues tomorrow at dawn. Jake looked up in surprise. I'm not being removed? Did I say you were being removed? Vexthor's expression did not change. You finished the course. That is more than many expected. Report to medical dismissed. Jake limped toward the medical bay, every muscle in his body protesting. As he walked through the corridors of the station, he passed groups of recruits who had finished hours ago. They were clean, rested, and talking among themselves. When they saw Jake, still covered in mud and bleeding from a dozen small cuts, they fell silent. Then the laughter started. Look at the human, someone said. Did he crawl through the entire course? I finished my meal and took a nap in the time it took him to finish, another voice added. Skormal stepped out from a group of Kraventhari recruits.
4 hours.
My grandmother could complete the course faster than that, and she has been dead for 10 years. The laughter grew louder. Jake kept walking. He had no energy left for words or anger. He just wanted to clean up and sleep. The medical bay was efficient. Automated systems cleaned his wounds and applied healing gel. A medical officer, a Nerexi in a water suit, examined him with clicking sounds of disapproval. You are covered in bruises and minor injuries, the officer said. I will list you as unfit for training tomorrow. No, Jake said firmly. I'll be ready. You are barely able to stand. I'll be ready, Jake repeated. The officer made a note on their datapad and waved him away. Jake returned to his quarters and collapsed on his bed. Every part of him hurt. He pulled out his communicator and sent a message to Earth. The delay for interstellar communication meant he would not get a response for hours, but he needed to tell someone what he was going through. Ben, it's harder than we thought. I finished last in everything today. They all laugh at me. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm not quitting. Not yet. He also sent a message to Kyle Morrison, his friend who had been selected for the program but withdrew at the last moment. Kyle had called Jake crazy for accepting the position. Maybe Kyle had been right. Sleep took Jake quickly, but it was not restful. He dreamed of falling off walls and drowning in mud pits while voices laughed all around him. The next morning came too soon. Jake's body had stiffened overnight, and every movement sent sharp pains through his muscles. He forced himself up and got dressed. Today would be combat training. The combat hall was a massive arena with padded floors and various weapons mounted on the walls. The recruits paired off for sparring matches. Jake found himself standing across from a Chittari warrior. The insect being's forearms flexed, each one tipped with natural claws. Its armored exoskeleton gleamed under the arena lights. Try not to die too quickly, soft skin, the Chittari said in clicking translated speech. The match began. The Chittari moved like lightning, all four arms striking from different angles. Jake tried to defend himself, but it was hopeless. A fist caught him in the ribs. A claw raked across his shoulder. A leg sweep took his feet out from under him and he crashed to the mat. He got up. The Chittari hit him again and he went down again. He got up, down, each time slower, each time more painful. Stay down, the Chittari finally said. This is over. Jake pushed himself up one more time, blood dripping from his nose. Not yet. The Chittari looked confused, then annoyed. It hit Jake hard enough to send him sliding across the mat. This time Jake could not get up. His vision swam and his body would not obey his commands. "Match over," Lieutenant Zarek called out. He looked down at Jake with disgust. "Foolishness is not the same as courage, human. Learn the difference." Medics carried Jake from the arena. Through his blurred vision, he saw Commander Vexthor watching from the observation deck. The great warrior's expression was impossible to read. That night, a message arrived from Earth. It was from Lisa Chen, the communications officer who coordinated messages between the Academy and humanity. "Jake, the whole world is watching you. We know it's hard. We know you're struggling, but you're showing them that we don't give up. Keep going. We believe in you." Jake read the message 3 times. The whole world was watching. The whole world was seeing him fail over and over again. But they were also seeing him get back up. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. He might finish last in every test. He might lose every fight, but he would not quit. He would show them what humans were made of, even if it killed him. 3 weeks had passed since Jake arrived at Kraventhar Station. 3 weeks of finishing last in every physical test. 3 weeks of losing every combat match. 3 weeks of constant mockery from the other recruits. But Jake was still there, still training, still refusing to quit. The morning assembly was different today. Commander Vexthor stood before the recruits with unusual tension in his posture. Behind him, a holographic display showed a barren moon with rocky terrain and dark red skies. "In 2 days you will face the trial of the Long March," Vexthor announced. "You will be transported to Calyx Moon, where you will navigate 72 hours through hostile terrain. You will carry full combat gear. You will face radiation zones, extreme temperatures, and dangerous wildlife. Many species have advantages in this trial. The Narexi can enter stasis to conserve energy. The Chitauri can digest almost anything for sustenance. The Kraventhari can regulate body temperature. The human has none of these advantages." All eyes turned to Jake. He stood at attention, trying not to show the fear building in his chest. "Perhaps the human should sit this one out," Lieutenant Zarek suggested. "We would not want an interstellar incident if he dies on that moon." "The human requested no special treatment," Vexthor said coldly. "He will participate with the others." That night, Jake received a communication from Earth. A woman appeared on his screen, middle-aged with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair. She introduced herself as Dr. Maya Brooks, a xenobiologist who had been studying Kraventhari culture. "Jake, I've been following your progress," she said. "I want you to know something about the Kraventhari. They value strength, yes, but they value something else even more. They value honor and loyalty. Remember that during the trial." Jake thanked her and ended the call, not entirely sure what she meant. How would honor help him survive a 3-day march through a deadly moon? The next day, Jake checked his equipment carefully. Water containers, food rations, navigation tools, protective gear. Everything was standard issue. He filled his water containers to maximum capacity and sealed them tight. What Jake did not see was Skormal watching him from across the equipment bay. The Kraventhari recruit waited until Jake left, then approached Jake's locker. With quick movements, Skormal used a small tool to puncture tiny holes in Jake's water containers. The holes were small enough that they would not leak immediately, but would slowly drain the water over time. Skormal smiled to himself and walked away. The transport ships carried the recruits to Calyx Moon the following morning. Jake stood with the others on the landing platform, looking out at the harsh landscape. The sky was dark red, filled with swirling dust clouds. The ground was rocky and cracked, with steam vents releasing toxic gases at irregular intervals. In the distance, massive creatures with armored backs moved slowly across the plains. "You have 72 hours, Commander Vexthor said. "Your goal is to reach the beacon on the far side of the continent. It is 200 kilometers from here. Good luck." The recruits spread out and began their march. Within an hour, Jake was alone. The others had pulled far ahead, their superior strength and endurance allowing them to cover ground much faster. Jake settled into a steady pace, trying to conserve his energy for the long journey ahead. The first 12 hours were difficult but manageable. Jake navigated around radiation zones marked on his scanner, avoided the territorial creatures, and pushed through the heat that seemed to radiate up from the ground itself. He stopped to drink from his water container and noticed with alarm that it was already half empty. That was wrong. He should have used less than a quarter of his supply by now. Jake checked the container and found the tiny puncture holes. Someone had sabotaged his water. He checked the other containers and found the same damage. His heart sank. He had maybe 8 hours of water left, and he was only a fraction of the way through the trial. He considered turning back, calling for pickup, admitting defeat. Then he thought about the whole world watching. He thought about Lieutenant Zarek's mocking voice. He thought about proving them wrong. Jake sealed the holes as best he could with emergency tape and continued walking. 24 hours into the march, Jake's water was gone. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His head pounded with dehydration. The heat was unbearable and his body was shutting down. He stumbled more than walked, his vision going in and out of focus. He entered a canyon system, seeking shade from the brutal sun. The walls rose high on either side, carved by ancient waters that no longer flowed. Jake's scanner showed a radiation zone ahead, one of the more dangerous areas. He would have to move through it quickly to minimize exposure. As he rounded a corner in the canyon, Jake heard a sound that stopped him in his tracks. Someone was calling for help. The voice was familiar, speaking in the Kraventhari language that Jake had learned during his training. Jake followed the sound and found a sight he never expected. Skormal, the recruit who had mocked him since the first day, was trapped under a collapsed section of canyon wall. Large rocks pinned his leg and the Kraventhari's face was twisted in pain. "You," Skormal said when he saw Jake. His voice mixed surprise and shame. The human. Jake's first instinct was to keep walking. This was the person who had tormented him for weeks. This was probably the person who had sabotaged his water. He could leave Skormal here and continue on. He might even finish the march without the extra time this would cost him. But even as Jake thought these things, his feet were moving toward Skormal. He set down his pack and examined the situation. The rocks were too heavy for him to lift, but maybe he could dig around them and create enough space to pull Skormal free. "What are you doing?" Skormal asked. "Getting you out," Jake said simply. "Why?" "I have been cruel to you. I have made your life here miserable. I damaged your water container so you would fail this trial." Jake looked at Skormal with tired eyes. "I know. Then why help me?" "Because it's right," Jake said. He began digging with his hands, pulling away smaller rocks and dirt. "Where I come from, we don't leave people behind, even if they're not our friends." For 3 hours, Jake worked. He dug until his fingers bled. He used pieces of metal from his pack as improvised tools. He ignored his own thirst, his own exhaustion, his own pain. Slowly, inch by inch, he created enough space to pull Skormal's leg free. The Kraventhari's leg was badly injured, possibly broken. Jake used his emergency medical supplies to stabilize it, fashioning a splint from materials he found in the canyon. He gave Skormal the last of his water even though his own throat felt like sandpaper. "You have doomed yourself," Skormal said quietly. "You have no water. You have no time. You cannot finish the march now." "Probably not," Jake agreed. He activated his emergency beacon. "But you'll survive. That's what matters." They waited together in the canyon as Jake's vision began to fade. The dehydration and exhaustion were finally catching up with him. He sat with his back against the canyon wall, watching the dark red sky above. "Why?" Skormal asked again. "Why sacrifice yourself for me?" "Because that's what humans do," Jake said, his voice barely a whisper. "We help each other. We don't leave anyone behind. Not for money, not for glory, not for revenge. We just do what's right." The rescue team arrived an hour later. They found Jake unconscious and Skormal sitting beside him, keeping the human's head shaded from the sun with his own body. The medics rushed Jake onto a medical transport while Skormal told the rescue team everything that had happened. Commander Vexthor was waiting when they returned to the station. He listened to Skormal's report in silence, his golden eyes never leaving the Kraventhari recruit's face. "And the human knew you had sabotaged his water?" Vexthor asked. "Yes, Commander. I told him the truth. He helped me anyway." Vexthor nodded slowly. He walked to the medical bay where Jake was receiving treatment. The young human was awake now, hooked up to machines that were rehydrating his body and treating his various injuries. "You failed the trial," Vexthor said bluntly. "I know," Jake replied. His voice was hoarse and rough. "You sacrificed your own success to save someone who had tormented you and sabotaged your chance of completing the march." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Jake thought about all the answers he could give. About humanity's values, about doing the right thing, about honor and compassion. But he was too tired for speeches. "Because he needed help and I could give it," Jake said. "That's all." Commander Vexthor stood there for a long moment, studying Jake with an intensity that made the young human uncomfortable. Then, for the first time since Jake had arrived at the station, the great warrior's expression changed. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Rest, Jake Sullivan," Vexthor said. "Tomorrow we will talk." As the commander left, Jake closed his eyes. He had failed the trial, but somehow he did not feel like a failure. For the first time since arriving at Craventhar Station, Jake felt like he had finally done something right. Word of what Jake had done spread through Craventhar Station like wildfire. By the time he was released from the medical bay 2 days later, every recruit and instructor knew the story. The human had sacrificed his own success to save a rival who had sabotaged him. Some called it weakness, some called it foolishness, but some were beginning to call it something else entirely: honor. Jake walked through the corridors and noticed the difference immediately. The mockery had not stopped completely, but it had changed. Some recruits now nodded to him as he passed. Others looked at him with something that might have been respect, though they quickly hid it. Scormel, walking with a medical brace on his leg, stopped Jake in the hallway. "I owe you my life," the Craventhari said. His voice was stiff, as if the words were difficult to speak. "I have treated you with cruelty and disrespect. I tried to make you fail, and you saved me anyway. I do not understand humans, but I understand debt. I am in yours." "You don't owe me anything," Jake said. "Among my people, a life debt is sacred," Scormall insisted. "If you need anything, you have only to ask." The two parted ways, and Jake continued to the training grounds. Commander Vexthor had summoned him for a private conversation. Jake found the commander in a small meditation chamber, a room with simple walls and a single window looking out at the stars. "Sit," Vexthor commanded. Jake sat on a bench across from the massive warrior. Up close, the commander's scars were even more impressive. There were dozens of them, each one telling a story of battle and survival. "Tell me about Earth," Vexthor said. "Tell me about human warriors." Jake was surprised by the request, but answered honestly. He told Vexthor about Earth's military history, about soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their comrades, about firefighters who ran into burning buildings to rescue strangers, about ordinary people who did extraordinary things when others needed help. "Your species values self-sacrifice," Vexthor observed. "We value helping each other," Jake corrected. "It's not about sacrifice. It's about knowing that we're all in this together, that we're stronger as a group than as individuals." Vexthor nodded slowly. "The Craventhari have always valued individual strength above all else. Perhaps we have forgotten that there are different kinds of strength." Before Jake could respond, the door burst open. Lieutenant Zarak strode in, his face twisted with anger. "Commander, I must protest," Zarak said. "The entire station is talking about the human as if he were some kind of hero. He failed the trial. He should be removed from the program." "He saved a fellow recruit's life," Vexthor replied calmly. "He showed weakness. He put another's success above his own. That is not the way of warriors, is it not?" Vexthor stood towering over the lieutenant. "I have seen you on the battlefield, Zarak. I have seen you abandon wounded soldiers because helping them would risk your own glory. Is that the way of warriors? Or is it the way of cowards who hide behind the word honor?" Zarak's face flushed darker. "If you will not remove the human, then I invoke the ancient right. I challenge him to the test of equals. If he is truly worthy of being here, let him prove it in single combat." Jake's blood ran cold. He knew about the test of equals from his studies. It was an ancient Craventhari tradition where disputes were settled through ritual combat. If he refused, he would be admitting cowardice. If he accepted, he would have to fight a full-grown Craventhari warrior in single combat. He had already lost to opponents far weaker than Zarak. "You cannot be serious," Vexthor said, his voice dangerous. "The human is not your equal in physical combat. This would be murder, not a test." "Then he should refuse," Zarak said with a cruel smile. "And prove that humans are indeed cowards." Jake stood up. His legs felt weak, but his voice was steady. "I accept." "Jake, no," Vexthor said sharply. "I have to," Jake replied. "If I refuse, it proves everything they've said about humans. That we're weak, that we don't belong here. I won't give them that satisfaction." A message arrived from Earth later that day. Captain Ryan Foster, a human military observer, appeared on Jake's screen. He looked worried. "Jake, we've heard about the challenge. You can't do this. If you're killed or badly injured, it will create a political nightmare. The Galactic Coalition will see it as the Kraventhari attacking humanity. I've already accepted, Jake said. I can't back out now. Yes, you can. Come home. You've already proven more than anyone expected. I haven't proven anything yet, Jake said quietly. But I will. The next 3 days were preparation. Jake trained as hard as he could, studying Kraventhari fighting techniques, building up his strength. Skormel came to him one evening with advice. Zarek is fast and strong, even by our standards, the Kraventhari said. You cannot beat him with power. You must use strategy. Any suggestions? Jake asked. Yes, do not try to win. Try to survive. The day of the challenge arrived. The entire academy gathered in the main combat arena. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species. Jake stood in the center of the arena in light combat gear, looking impossibly small in the massive space. Across from him, Lieutenant Zarek entered wearing full traditional Kraventhari armor, carrying weapons that gleamed under the bright lights. Commander Vexthor served as the judge. He stood at the edge of the arena, his face grave. This combat will continue until one participant yields or is unable to continue, Vexthor announced. Begin. Zarek moved with frightening speed. His first strike nearly took Jake's head off. Jake ducked and rolled, barely avoiding the blow. The lieutenant pressed his attack, driving Jake backward with a combination of strikes that would have killed a human instantly if they connected. Jake focused on defense, on staying alive. He dodged and blocked and moved, using every bit of agility he possessed. He could not match Zarek's strength, but he could be unpredictable. He could be quick. Minutes passed. Jake was already breathing hard while Zarek had barely broken a sweat. The lieutenant landed a glancing blow that sent Jake spinning to the ground. Jake rolled and came up, his arm numb from the impact. Give up, human, Zarek said. You have shown courage by accepting the challenge. No one will call you a coward now. Not yet, Jake gasped. The fight continued. Jake began to use the environment, throwing sand in Zarek's eyes, using the pillars at the arena's edge for cover. He landed a few solid hits of his own, strikes that would have dropped a human but barely fazed the Kraventhari warrior. 20 minutes into the fight, Jake's vision was blurred with sweat and blood. His body was covered in bruises. His left leg was barely supporting his weight. But he was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to yield. Zarek raised his weapon for what would surely be the final blow. Jake tried to move, but his exhausted body would not respond fast enough. The strike was coming, and Jake knew he could not avoid it. Then Commander Vexthor stepped into the arena. The entire stadium fell silent. Vexthor walked calmly to stand beside Jake, placing himself between the young human and the lieutenant's weapon. What are you doing, Commander? Zarek demanded. I invoke the right of blood bond, Vexthor said, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. This human is under my protection. He is my brother in arms. To strike him, you must first strike me. The audience erupted in shocked murmurs. The right of blood bond was ancient and sacred among the Kraventhari. It meant that Vexthor was claiming Jake as family, bound by honor to defend him as he would his own blood relatives. Zarek lowered his weapon slowly, his face showing disbelief. You would claim a human as brother? This is madness, is it? Vexthor turned to face the assembled crowd. I have watched this human since he arrived. I have seen him fail every physical test. I have seen him lose every combat match. But I have also seen something else. I have seen courage that does not depend on strength. I have seen honor that does not require victory. I have seen a warrior's heart in a body that others mock. He placed one massive hand on Jake's shoulder. This human saved the life of his enemy at cost to himself. He accepted a challenge he knew he could not win rather than be called a coward. He has stood in this arena for 20 minutes against an opponent who should have defeated him in seconds. If this is not the spirit of a warrior, then I do not know what is. Vexthor turned back to Zarek. So I ask you, Lieutenant, will you continue this fight? Will you strike down my brother? Or will you acknowledge that perhaps humans have something to teach us about honor? Zarek stood frozen for a long moment. Then slowly he placed his weapon on the ground and knelt, the traditional Kraventhari gesture of respect. I yield, Zarek said quietly. I was wrong. Forgive me, Commander. Forgive me, human. Jake collapsed to his knees, unable to stand any longer. Vexthor caught him before he hit the ground. You did well, brother, the commander said softly. Rest now. As medical teams rushed forward, Jake looked up at Vexthor through blurred vision. Why? He managed to ask. Vexthor smiled, a true smile this time. Because I finally understand what your Dr. Brooks tried to tell you. Honor and loyalty matter more than strength, and you, Jake Sullivan, have both in abundance. The medical bay had become familiar to Jake over the past weeks, but this time felt different. As he lay recovering from the challenge, he received visitors. Skormal came first, bringing food from his own rations. Then other Kraventhari recruits appeared, offering words of respect. Even some of the Chitauri and Narexi stopped by to acknowledge what Jake had done. The news of Commander Vexthor's declaration had spread beyond Kraventhar Station. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. The Galactic Coalition issued a statement praising the bonds forming between species. Earth celebrated Jake as a hero, though Jake himself felt more confused than heroic. He had lost the fight. He had failed the trial. Yet somehow everything had changed. 3 days later, Vexthor summoned Jake to his private quarters. It was the first time Jake had been invited to the commander's personal space. The rooms were surprisingly simple, decorated with weapons from countless battles and photographs of Kraventhari warriors from generations past. A female Kraventhari was there, slightly smaller than Vexthor but no less impressive. Her scales were a lighter green and her golden eyes were sharp and intelligent. "This is Velthara, my mate," Vexthor said. "Velthara, this is Jake Sullivan, my brother-in-arms." Velthara studied Jake carefully. "So this is the human who has turned our academy upside down. You are smaller than I expected." "I get that a lot," Jake said with a tired smile. "My mate tells me you saved a rival and stood against a superior opponent." Velthara continued. "These are worthy actions. I approve of his choice to name you brother. You are welcome in our home." Vexthor gestured for Jake to sit. "Among the Kraventhari, the blood bond is more than words. It means you are family. It means we share honor and responsibility. It means I will defend you as I would my own blood, and you will do the same for me." "I understand," Jake said. "Or at least I'm trying to." "There is a ceremony," Velthara explained. 3 days from now, we will perform the traditional ritual before the academy. You will be formally recognized as part of our family." The next days passed in a blur. Jake continued his training, but the atmosphere was completely different. Recruits who had mocked him now sought his advice. In tactical simulations, Jake's strategic thinking began to shine. While he could not match the others in raw physical power, he could outthink them. He found weaknesses in defenses. He created strategies that used the strengths of different species working together. Instructors who had dismissed him now watched his work with interest. Jake realized that he had been so focused on surviving the physical challenges that he had not fully used his greatest strength, his mind. Skormal became a constant companion. The Kraventhari had taken his life debt seriously, and he helped Jake understand the complex social structures of the academy. Together they developed training methods that combined Kraventhari physical power with human tactical flexibility. "You make me think differently about combat," Skormal admitted one day. "I was taught that strength wins battles, but you show me that intelligence and courage can be just as powerful." The ceremony arrived on a clear day. The entire academy gathered in the Great Hall. Jake stood before them in formal attire, human dress uniform mixed with traditional Kraventhari symbols. Vexthor stood beside him, with Velthara and their son Krathor completing the family circle. Grand Marshal Thexvor, the head of the Kraventhari military, presided over the ceremony. He was even more intimidating than Vexthor, ancient and covered in more scars than Jake could count. "We stand here to witness an event that has not occurred in over 1,000 years, Thexvor announced. "A warrior from another species being welcomed into a Kraventhari family through the blood bond. Some say this breaks tradition. I say it honors the deepest tradition of all, recognizing true warriors, no matter what form they take." The ceremony involved ancient words in the Kraventhari language, the exchange of symbolic weapons, and the marking of Jake's arm with a temporary tattoo that would fade in time, but signified his acceptance into the family. When it was complete, Vexithor presented Jake with a curved blade, beautiful and deadly. "This is a Keshatar, an honor blade," Vexithor explained. "It has been in my family for 6 generations. Now it passes to you, my brother. Carry it with pride." Jake accepted the blade with shaking hands. The weight of it, both physical and symbolic, was overwhelming. "I don't know what to say." "Say that you will honor it," Vexthor replied. Say that you will continue to show the galaxy what humans are capable of. I will, Jake promised. The remaining months of training transformed Jake's experience at the academy. He still could not match the other species in physical tests, but he no longer needed to. He had found his place as a tactical specialist, someone who could analyze situations and create strategies that others had not considered. In team exercises, Jake became highly valued. His ability to coordinate different species' strengths made mixed teams far more effective. He taught others to think beyond pure force, to consider timing, positioning, and psychology in combat situations. Lieutenant Zarek, humbled by the events of the challenge, became one of Jake's strongest supporters. He publicly admitted his prejudice and worked to change the Academy's culture toward more acceptance of different approaches to warfare. Messages from Earth continued throughout Jake's training. His friend Kyle sent regular updates, proud of what Jake had accomplished. Lisa Chen coordinated celebrations back home as humanity watched one of their own succeed where many had predicted failure. Dr. Maya Brooks sent her analysis of how Jake's success was changing galactic perceptions of humanity. But the message that meant the most came from Ben Carter, his old mentor. Jake, I always knew you had it in you, not the strength to overpower them, but the strength to show them something new. You've opened doors for all of us. Every human who follows you to that academy will walk a path you made easier. That's what real heroes do. I'm proud of you, kid. The final test came in the form of a massive tactical simulation. All the graduating recruits were divided into teams and given command of simulated fleets in a complex military scenario. Jake's team was the most diverse, with Kreventhari, Chitari, Narexi, and Zephrons all under his command. The scenario was designed to be impossible. 3 fleets against 5. Inferior numbers and limited resources. Most teams chose aggressive tactics, trying to overwhelm the enemy through force. They all failed within the first hour of simulation. Jake took a different approach. He studied the enemy positions, found their supply lines, and created a strategy based on disruption rather than destruction. His team worked together, each species using their unique abilities and coordinated strikes. When the simulation ended, Jake's fleet had achieved what the designers thought impossible: a complete victory with minimal losses. Commander Vexthor reviewed the results with unconcealed pride. You did not think like a Kreventhari warrior. You thought like a human, and it worked beautifully. Graduation day arrived with ceremony and celebration. Jake stood among hundreds of recruits who had started the program months ago. Many had failed and left. Those who remained represented the best of their species. When Jake's name was called, the entire academy rose to their feet in respect. He walked across the stage to receive his certification, officially recognized as a graduate of Kreventhar Combat Academy. Grand Marshal Thexivor personally handed him the credentials. The first human, Thexivor said quietly so only Jake could hear, but not the last. You have changed more than you know, young warrior. The celebration that night filled the station with joy and camaraderie. Species that had been strangers months ago now celebrated together as brothers and sisters in arms. Jake found himself surrounded by friends. People who had once mocked him now genuinely happy for his success. Vexthor found Jake on an observation deck late that night, looking down at Earth visible in the distance. Thinking of home? The commander asked. Always, Jake admitted. I miss it. But I'm also going to miss this place. Is that strange? Not at all. You have become part of 2 worlds now. That is a gift, brother. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. What will you do now? Vexthor asked. Return to Earth. Report what I've learned. Then if they'll have me, I want to come back. I want to help train other humans who come here. I want to build bridges between our peoples. They will have you, Vexthor said with certainty, and I will be here waiting to train alongside my brother again. The transport ship that would carry Jake back to Earth departed the next morning. He stood at the airlock with his bag, the honor blade secured at his side. Vexthor, Velthara, Krathor, Skormal, and dozens of others had come to see him off. Travel safely, brother, Vexthor said, placing one massive hand on Jake's shoulder. And return soon. There is much work ahead for both our peoples. I will, Jake promised. Thank you. For everything. For believing in me when no one else did. I did not believe in you at first, Vexthor admitted with a slight smile. But you showed me I was wrong. You showed all of us. That is your greatest achievement. Jake boarded the transport, taking one last look at Craventhar Station. Months ago, he had arrived here as an outsider, mocked and dismissed. He was leaving as a graduate, a brother-in-arms to the greatest warrior in the galaxy, and proof that humanity had earned its place among the stars.